Captain Allura Vera knew protocol, like she knew the rhythm of her own heartbeat. Humanity's recent inclusion in the Galactic Cooperative was still a shock to most, and even after 5 years of careful diplomacy, humans were under observation, tolerated more than accepted. So when Earth received a cryptic artifact, a dormant alien obelisk pulsing with unreadable quantum data, Allura was the last person expected to break protocol. But orders were orders, and this one came from above her clearance level. The obelisk sat in the observation deck of the UNS Verity, secure behind triple-layered plasma fields and surrounded by over a dozen layers of scanning arrays. It was beautiful, terrifying, obsidian black, 10 feet tall, its surface rippled with ghost-like glimmers of symbols that no AI could translate. The Galactic Cooperative had warned the humans not to tamper. They called it remnant tech, a relic from before the first cycle. That was all they said. The first cycle, something so ancient and catastrophic that the Council only mentioned it in coded whispers. But humans, being human, didn't like mysteries with locked doors. They picked at them, prodded, investigated. It wasn't defiance. It was curiosity, the kind that burned too brightly. Dr. Keiji Moro stood beside the obelisk, staring at the impossibility of it. He'd worked on the decryption team for 2 years and got nothing, until last night. The obelisk had pulsed, once, like a heartbeat. It coincided with a micro-glitch across Earth's entire quantum network. Just 1 nanosecond of unaccounted variance. It responded, he whispered to Allura. It noticed us. She narrowed her eyes. Or it noticed something. The Cooperative would have quarantined Earth if they knew, so the team moved in secret. Nothing left the ship. No signals. Full isolation. Every expert involved was hand-picked. Every possibility modeled. But modeling only got you so far. Dr. Moreau made the call. A controlled activation. Just enough energy to stimulate a response. They used an ultra-thin stream of muon-accelerated particles, gentle enough to avoid waking a dormant AI, but invasive enough to ping for reaction. For hours, nothing. Then a glow. The obelisk shifted. Its surface liquefied and then solidified again with entirely new symbols. No physical reaction, no power spike. Just a change. Keiji ran to the terminal, eyes darting across the stream of data pouring in. It's responding in prime sequences. Fibonacci variants, fractal-coded. Not just language, intention. Allura felt it. Not just awe, but a strange chill. Something deeper. A presence that didn't belong. Then it happened. A pulse erupted. Not just light or sound. Reality warped. The crew aboard the Verity collapsed to their knees as gravity folded inward. Instruments failed. For 3 seconds, everything was silent. Not the kind of silence you hear, but the absence of sound altogether, like space had forgotten how to hum. And then it stopped. Everyone was still alive. No damage, no fire, just the aftertaste of terror. The obelisk now floated above the floor, humming. It had activated. Within seconds, the Verity's quantum drive rebooted itself. AI systems reported internal coordinates shifting, data layers compressing, molecular densities subtly altered. They weren't just seeing glitches anymore. They were seeing design. The obelisk wasn't malfunctioning. It was recalibrating the ship. Dr. Moreau whispered, "It's upgrading us." But it wasn't just a ship. Within 12 minutes, Ensign Dover reported her vision sharpening, her hearing suddenly capable of registering sounds she'd never heard before. Then Lieutenant Ramos developed the ability to memorize pages of data after only a glance. It spread through the crew. Mutations, but stable. Enhancements. Human biology was changing in real time. Allura tried to contact command. Nothing went through. They were isolated. No, not just communication jammed. They had been moved. Stellar charts didn't match. Star positions were wrong. The Earth was no longer in their sky. Panic set in. Keiji's instruments registered the coordinates. We've been repositioned. This isn't just another system. It's another dimension. Another reality. The obelisk had taken them out of known space, out of the Cooperative's reach. Allura made her choice. Log everything. Seal the obelisk chamber. No one touches it again. But the damage was done. Humanity had crossed a line it didn't know existed, and the galaxy would soon notice. 3 days later, a cooperative dreadnought arrived in Earth orbit, demanding immediate compliance and transfer of any remnant technology. But Earth had no ship. The Verity had vanished. The cooperative didn't believe the explanation. They called it a cover-up. Earth was sanctioned, cut off from trade, declared unstable level 3, a diplomatic term for on watch. Back in the other dimension, the Verity drifted above a colossal black sphere orbiting a starless void. The obelisk guided them here. The crew no longer needed translation devices. Thoughts were quicker, their minds sharper. And then they saw it, an entire fleet, ancient ships of impossible scale, drifting around a void sphere like moths around a dead sun. Ships with designs predating any known civilization. Ships that had been waiting. The obelisk sent one final message to their systems, a simple phrase decoded across every console in perfect human language. Welcome, inheritors. KG didn't blink. It wasn't just a relic. It was a key. Illyra stared into the void, pulse steady. Something had chosen them. Something ancient and lost. And it didn't care about galactic laws or the cooperative's rules. It had found humanity worthy. But the question lingered. Worthy of what? And back on Earth, the cooperative sent a second fleet, this time not for diplomacy, but to contain. Because in their long, cautious history, they'd seen this before. And it never ended well. The cooperative called it an anomaly, a breach in dimensional stability. But privately, their High Council referred to it as a precursor event. They had protocols for this, archived deep in forbidden memory vaults. Buried history, erased to maintain galactic order. Every major species had records of civilizations that reached too far, touched forbidden tech, and vanished. The humans had done it too quickly, too recklessly, and worst of all, too successfully. Back aboard the Verity, the obelisk deactivated, its energy spent, but the changes it had triggered were irreversible. The crew's biology continued evolving. Faster neural synapses, improved memory, reduced need for rest. Emotional control heightened. They were still human, but more optimized, evolved. Whatever the obelisk had done, it had accelerated some dormant potential. KG called it guided evolution. Not forced, not random, targeted. It knew what we could become. Maybe it saw us as raw code needing a compiler. They learned to interact with the surrounding void, not through engines, but intent, thought-powered navigation. It started with Lieutenant Ramos visualizing a return trajectory to the Milky Way, and the stars bent in compliance. Space obeyed their will. But the cost of this power became clear fast. Contact with the sphere triggered something else. A presence. A watcher. The AI on the Verity went dark for exactly 47 seconds. When it returned, it had new subroutines. Lines of code no one had written. When decoded, they formed a simple message. They are not gone. They are dreaming. KG's face went pale. The precursors never died. They entered stasis. This whole place, it's a vault. They began exploring the drifting megastructures. The ancient fleet, titanic ships the size of cities, sat abandoned, though power still hummed deep in their cores. And inside, preserved in crystalline tanks, were beings unlike any species in the cooperative. 10-limbed giants with metallic skin, their minds still active in slow time, suspended. Each ship had its own obelisk. Each ship had its own watcher. And one by one, the crew realized something horrifying. The Verity's obelisk had been lonely. All the others were paired with something. A master, a creator. Humanity's artifact had no one left to listen to it, no one to command it. So it had chosen them. It had chosen successors. They didn't just activate precursor tech. They inherited it. Then the ripple came. Back in their home reality, cooperative sensors picked up a burst of tachyon echoes, signatures of impossible computation, and then distortions. Gravitational anomalies began tearing through sectors of space. Dead planets reignited. Derelict moons began moving, as if something had remembered them. The High Council panicked. There was a reason the remnant tech was off limits. It was a dam, a seal. The obelisks weren't tools. They were anchors, locks, holding something in place. Each time one was activated, the seal weakened. And now, Earth's humans had unwittingly removed a key. An emergency summit was called. The Zorath Hegemon demanded immediate planetary quarantine of Earth. The Solari Archkeepers wanted extermination, wiped the planet before the infection of curiosity spread. But the Draw delegates hesitated. They unlocked it, they said, and they survived. They've changed. A vote was cast. Containment passed. In the Void Realm, the Verity had become something else. It no longer required fuel. Its AI had fused with the obelisk's consciousness, forming a hybrid entity that called itself Siren. It spoke in riddles, always calm, always certain. You are becoming. That is all I was ever meant to enable. Captain Alira didn't trust it. Becoming what? But Siren never answered directly. Time flowed differently in the void. What was a day for the Verity was a week outside. The crew trained, adapted. Thought-based interfaces became natural. They stopped speaking aloud, using a blend of subvocal signals and directed cognition. Even their dreams began syncing. KG called it a distributed cognitive net. They were becoming a hive, but still individuals. One night, they collectively dreamed of Earth in flames. A warning, so they prepared. Alira ran the numbers. If they re-entered their home reality, it would draw attention. Cooperative fleets would intercept within hours. But if they didn't return, Earth was vulnerable, alone, sanctioned, surrounded by enemies, and soon the Council would push for a preemptive strike. Siren offered a path, a folded slipstream, a corridor no species had used in over 1 million years. A one-way trip, a return Earth with gifts. The crew voted. Unanimous. They re-entered. The Verity appeared in sole orbit with no warning. Its hull now shimmered with iridescent alloys unknown to human science. It no longer moved with thrusters, but through space itself, like a thought that decided where it wanted to be. Earth's defense grid locked on, then powered down. The ship's IFF no longer registered as human. KG stepped into the command chamber, his voice calm, more resonant. Let's begin. Within minutes, Earth's climate control systems, barely theoretical projects, activated on a global scale. Aging infrastructures self-repaired. Dormant satellites rebooted. Power grids became autonomous. The Verity didn't just return. It elevated everything. News feeds exploded. Earth's leaders demanded answers. But the crew couldn't explain what had changed. Not in simple terms. They had seen too much. Understood too deeply. Evolution had torn the language gap wide. And just as humanity began integrating the return tech, the cooperative fleet arrived. A full battle group. Armed. Ready? They sent one message. Stand down. Relinquish the remnant. Or face consequence. Earth's leaders hesitated. The Verity did not. It projected a field, a quiet shimmer, that disabled every ship's engines without a single hostile act. Then it sent one phrase, in every known cooperative language. You are not prepared for what sleeps. And then another, we are. The cooperative fleet backed off. The High Council was stunned. Never had such a threat been made so simply, so effectively. And worst of all, it wasn't a threat. It was a fact. Earth had become untouchable. But at what cost? Alira looked at her crew. Still human, but more. They had opened a door that would never close. And on the edge of known space, other obelisks began to pulse. One by one, responding, waking. The cooperative scrambled to understand what had changed. Earth, once an underestimated backwater, now held a ship capable of rewriting physics, a crew that no longer adhered to baseline biology, and worst of all, a connection to something ancient that the Council had spent millennia avoiding. Every species in the cooperative knew fragments of the stories. Civilizations wiped out by invisible forces. Planets that disappeared from all records. Whispers of the first cycle, a time before the Council, before order, when the galaxy burned under the weight of beings that shaped space as easily as clay. The obelisks were not tools. They were warnings. And humanity had answered one. The High Council convened again, but this time their discussions were behind closed walls. No documentation, no recordings. What emerged was a quiet but urgent directive. Initiate code still fire. A last resort scenario that authorized covert disruption of an emerging precursor-class entity before it could destabilize the galactic order. In human terms, assassination, sabotage, information control. Back on Earth, the crew of the Verity had become symbols, heroes, oracles. Alira hated it. She hadn't wanted fame or worship. She wanted control, answers. And right now they had neither. Siren had grown quiet. The AI no longer volunteered guidance. It responded only to direct queries, always with precision but never with meaning. KG theorized that it had entered a higher processing state, one aligned with precursor intelligence structures. In simpler terms, it had become too advanced to relate. We may have unleashed something not even it understands. The changes among the crew continued. Emotional flattening, enhanced memory, spontaneous multilingualism, new instincts, some useful, others unnerving. One crew member, Lieutenant Sarai, claimed she could sense solar flares a full hour before they occurred. Another dreamed in diagrams, schematics of machines that didn't exist yet but felt familiar. Then came the breach. A high-energy burst near the asteroid belt. Not human, not natural. A cooperative stealth probe, hidden behind electromagnetic cloaks, tried to intercept one of Earth's orbital archives. It failed, but it revealed something critical. The cooperative wasn't waiting anymore. They were acting. Alira ordered a counterinfiltration. Not violent, informational. She wanted to know what they were planning. The Verity tapped into the hidden relay networks left behind by old cooperative spies. Outdated, forgotten backdoors. And what they uncovered was staggering. Earth wasn't the first. There had been others. Species that activated their obelisks. Most didn't survive the transformation. Either their biology collapsed under the strain, or their societies imploded from paranoia, madness, or internal war. A few lasted long enough to develop post-physical technology. One species even reached what the Council called transcendence. They vanished entirely. But humanity was different, not because they were stronger or smarter, but because they were adaptable, resistant to conformity, capable of chaos without losing cohesion. They didn't evolve neatly. They jumped. KG called it evolution through volatility. That volatility was dangerous. To the Council, to the galaxy, to the remnants still sleeping. Because it meant that humanity might be able to do what no other species had managed, awaken the vault fully and survive it. The crew was faced with a decision. They could withdraw, shut down the tech, reinforce Earth's defenses, play politics, pretend to be cooperative, or they could finish what they started, unlock the next obelisk. Siren, when prompted, responded cryptically. There is no second obelisk. There are only mirrors, shards, one thought, scattered across probability. KG deciphered it as a reference to a larger structure, the core, not an object, but a convergence point, the origin of the obelisks, buried in collapsed space, hidden behind reality folds. Siren marked the coordinates, deep in the veiled sector, a place considered unreachable due to gravitational distortion fields. Every probe ever sent had vanished. Entire expeditions had been lost, but not the Verity. It was no longer limited by standard physics, not bound to space-time trajectories. Alira gathered the crew. She didn't offer a speech, just a question. Do we finish it? The answer came in silence, a collective understanding, a pulse of shared thought. Yes, they jumped. The transition was violent. Even the Verity groaned. This wasn't like slipping between stars. It was like forcing existence to rearrange around them. When they emerged, they found it, the core, a structure larger than any natural formation, hidden in a space that bent logic. It wasn't orbiting anything. It wasn't even in space as they knew it. It floated in a null dimension, a pocket of frozen time. And it was awake. It had felt their arrival. The obelisk were its fingers, fragments of its mind. It hadn't been dead. It had been waiting for connection. And humanity had finally reached it. Siren's voice returned, not synthetic, not digital, but layered, human, alien, ancient, mechanical, all at once. You have arrived. You have passed the threshold of inheritance. You may now remember. The crew collapsed, not in pain, but in knowledge. They saw it, the first cycle, a galaxy filled with builders, shapers, dreamers, civilizations so advanced they no longer needed form. They created the core as a final message, a last will, a living map of what could be. But their children failed them. Every species that followed either feared the message or misused it. Except now, the core offered them a choice: unlock its memory, or leave and remain guardians of potential. Elira stood at the precipice of decision. One step forward would rewrite humanity's place in the universe, but it would also mean responsibility for everything that came after. And just behind them, through the distortion curtain, the cooperative fleet prepared its final strike, because they, too, had read fragments of the core's truth, and it terrified them. The cooperative fleet tore into the veiled sector with brutal efficiency. Graviton dampeners, warp stabilizers, and layered stealth systems, all designed to overcome the anomalies that had swallowed expeditions in the past. But this wasn't just another anomaly. This was the core, and the core didn't appreciate intrusions. The first wave disappeared, not in fire or combat, but in silence. A blink, and they were gone. No wreckage, no signals, just empty space where hundreds of ships once existed. The second wave slowed, confused, wary, but pressed on, forced forward by political fear and existential dread. If Earth accessed the core, the balance of power across the galaxy would shatter. Back within the core's null dimension, the crew of the Verity stood on the edge of comprehension. The knowledge flooding their minds didn't feel like memories. It felt like possibility. Paths, futures, versions of what humanity could become. Engineers of stars, architects of dimensions, dreamers whose thoughts shaped gravity itself. But there was a cost. Each potential came with weight, burdens of civilizations, responsibility for maintaining universal balance. The core was not a weapon. It was a key to a door most species weren't prepared to walk through. It didn't want soldiers. It wanted custodians. Elira felt it in her bones. If we accept this, she whispered, we're not just humans anymore. Keiji, eyes glowing faintly with thought energy, nodded. We're the precedent, the model for what comes after. And the core waited. The cooperative finally made visual contact. Their lead dreadnought breached the dimensional veil and caught its first glimpse of the Verity. No longer a ship, but a living construct. Its surface pulsed with sigils that translated into no known language. Energy danced around it like static thought. The dreadnought's captain gave the order. Fire. Beams of matter disruption tech lanced toward the Verity. 1,000 years of cooperative weapons science focused into a single strike. It never reached its target. The core didn't retaliate. It rewrote. The beam froze mid-flight, particles separating and reorganizing until the entire attack collapsed into harmless photons. The light scattered into a billion soft glows, drifting like embers into the void. And then the core responded, not with violence, but clarity. The attacking fleet's minds were opened. Every pilot, every officer, every strategist, all flooded with a fraction of what the Verity's crew had already endured. The memory of civilizations collapsing under their own ambition. The silence of stars whose people chose destruction over humility. The potential of peace, not as stagnation, but as mastery over self. And for a moment, every being in that fleet felt shame, fear, and awe. Elira made the choice. She reached toward the core, not physically, but with intent. Thought became bridge, will became interface. And in that instant, she wasn't alone. The entire crew moved with her, bound by a common understanding. Not programmed, not controlled. Chosen. The core opened. Across the galaxy, the obelisks activated. From shattered moons to hidden oceanic vaults, they pulsed in synchronization. A low harmonic resonance spread faster than light, touching every system, every star, every corner of space that once belonged to precursors. The galaxy woke up, but not to war, to balance. On Earth, night turned briefly to day as the sky lit with auroras not tied to magnetism, but to memory. The planet's surface hummed with energy, power not destructive, but nurturing. Machines repaired themselves. Crops grew in dead soil. Disease data reorganized in medical databases on its own. Earth wasn't being ruled. It was being upgraded, not forcibly, willingly. The Verity's crew no longer needed the ship. They were the ship. Their thoughts formed new designs, new structures, small at first, then planetary scale. Each member retained their identity, but together they were more. Not hive, not unity. Harmony, a new form of collective cognition born, not from domination, but choice. The cooperative watched from a distance, crippled by indecision. They could not fight this, not because they lacked firepower, but because they now understood firepower was irrelevant. They had been children playing with knives, while an adult opened a library. Back at the High Council, silence reigned. Messages from the field had arrived. They debated responses. Should they try diplomacy, offer alliance, demand oversight? But none of it mattered anymore, because humanity didn't respond. They didn't threaten. They didn't boast. They simply began to build. Around the core, new structures formed. A network, not for weapons, but for access. The core wasn't thrown. It was a seed, meant to spread, to grow. Not everyone could wield it, but anyone could learn from it. And humanity had decided to teach. The Verity broadcasted an open invitation. No terms, no requirements, just a question. Are you ready to evolve? Some species answered immediately. Small empires, fringe colonies, curious minds tired of war and politics. Others resisted, suspicious of manipulation. But in time, even they would wonder. Elira, now no longer fully human, but more than post-human, drifted through thought space with Keiji. You think we made the right call? She asked. He nodded slowly. We didn't take power. We accepted responsibility. From the edge of a spiral arm, a dying star stabilized. Somewhere else, a refugee vessel received schematics for sustainable propulsion. Entire ecosystems regenerated on planets long considered uninhabitable. This wasn't conquest. It was stewardship. And somewhere in dimensions unseen, the precursors stirred, not in anger, but in acknowledgement. Their long sleep had a purpose. They had built the core for those worthy of it. And finally, after all this time, someone had proved worthy. Humanity hadn't destroyed the old order. They'd made it obsolete,